It is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. We're here for the regular monthly work session, the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission, and apologize. A lot of folks have had a difficult day. If folks are out there listening or watching, I hope everybody is safe. I know there's been quite a bit of challenging weather, and then the follow-up as flooding happened as it did at my home as well. So I apologize. I do not have the civility pledge with us, but just suffice to say, we are living the civility pledge tonight. Normally have that in front of us. We do have 4 items on our work session tonight. The first one is going to involve some video engagement, and then the next 3 are staff or TSPLOST staff. And so the first one is the legal process and procedures for the collective bargaining negotiations. So we have Bill Mosley with us from Mosley, Jackson, and Lewis. And Judd, I don't know if there's anything that you want to provide by way of introduction?
I can provide a brief introduction, and Blaine can say anything that he might want to add. Mr. Mosley is with the law firm of Jackson Lewis PC. He specializes in representing governmental entities in collective bargaining negotiations and processes. I actually learned about Mr. Mosley from the attorney for South Fulton, who is one of the, I think, along to see Atlanta, maybe Savannah, the other jurisdictions. He guided them through their process of implementing, adopting their first agreement. And I may not be saying it exactly right, but Bill's going to go into detail. Blaine, Manager Williams, and I both thought it'd be very beneficial. So they've had their election. They had their election. They've selected the entity that's going to represent the firefighters, the union, and so I thought it'd be beneficial to let Bill present an overview of the process, and then allow you, the commissioners, to ask any questions you may have. Blaine, you have anything to add?
Thank you, Attorney Drake, and only that this, of course, is a new venture for all of us, and Attorney Drake identified Mr. Mosley and brought him here to work with us, and I will tell you that we have found value with him from the get-go, and I think he's had good conversations with union representatives and those folks within the IAFF, and so it's been very helpful to have somebody advise us up to this point, and I want to thank Attorney Drake and Attorney Mosley for their guidance.
All right. Now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Bill Mosley.
All right. Thank you. My name is Bill Mosley. I'm with the law firm of Jackson Lewis. For those of you that are not familiar with that firm, it's a 1,000-attorney firm with 62 offices across the country that really handles only what I'd call workplace-type law. I practice in the labor practice group. That practice group is comprised of about 150 attorneys that do just labor-type work. Not all of it is labor negotiations. There are all types of facets to labor work, but that is what I primarily spend most of my time doing, is labor negotiations. Most of my clients that I work with are governmental entities. They range from relatively small entities to very large entities, from Florida to California. So I stay very busy with them. I think the thing that's interesting and that you'll find interesting is that almost all of them are already unionized. So I start working with them once they're unionized. You, of course, are not unionized yet, but you're headed that direction. And so your firefighters, have done exactly what Attorney Drake suggested, which is they have voted to unionize. They are now represented by the IAFF. And so what I'd like to do today is walk you through the Georgia statute that tells us what we can do, doesn't really tell us much we can't do, to be honest. But it does talk to us about what we can do as far as these negotiations go and the process for implementing a labor union or having a firefighter labor union. Obviously, this is the first slide. So in Georgia, the legislature has done us a service, and I would say somewhat of a disservice, in that they've allowed unionization, but they haven't given us a ton of details about it. A lot of the states that I work in under various state laws have got a very robust process set up for the process of negotiating with the union, the process of what if there are unfair labor practices and this sort of thing. In Georgia, really all they did, all they being the legislature, which I'm aware they went back into session yesterday, all they did is create a statute called the Firefighters Mediation Act. And in that act, what it tells us is that if your city has a population of over 20,000 and it agrees by ordinance to basically recognize or be unionized, then firefighters, and it singles those individuals out, can bargain collectively with that city and be represented by a labor organization or an individual. And I say individual because the statute's very specific. It says, or a person, as to wages, rates of pay, hours, and working conditions, and things such as that. The labor organization that's selected by vote of a majority of the firefighters in a fire department is then recognized by that city, and the word they use in the code is municipality, provided that the labor organization doesn't advocate striking and has a no strike clause in its constitution and bylaws, which is what we have with the IAFF. The municipality or city has an obligation to meet and confer in good faith within 30 days of receipt of a written notice from the bargaining agent or the request for a meeting for collective bargaining purposes. We have not received that written notice yet. I am in conversation with IAFF every couple days. We will be getting that at some point in the near future. If the bargaining agent and municipality are unable within 30 days from that first meeting to reach an agreement on a CBA, then unresolved issues are submitted to mediation. Now, mediation, the statute tells us, what that is going to be like. It tells us who comprises the mediation board, sets out a timeline and a process and the various factors to be considered by the mediation board. But then it closes with a statement, and I've highlighted it here: a majority decision of the mediators shall be advisory in nature and shall not be binding upon either the bargaining agent or the corporate authorities. Well, that's well and good, and advisories are great, but oftentimes they don't do the job when you're collective bargaining. They don't, give you that definitive answer that you're going to want, and so you can move forward in the bargaining process. What the statute also says that any agreement negotiated between the parties, either before or within 30 days after mediation, will be the CBA. It also tells us the CBA can't exceed 1 year, which is a little bit unusual. Most collective bargaining agreements are 3 years, even in the public sector. I'm assuming that this was originally passed because it comported somewhat with various municipalities' budgeting process. And the CBA has to state that firefighters can't engage in any work stoppage, slowdown, or strike, which your CBA, once it's negotiated, will. So the current status is that, Athens-Clarke County agreed to come under the act. You did that completely appropriately. Parties agreed to a representation election process, and that process was overseen by the Board of Elections and Registration. And I will tell you, it was a very smooth, very good process. I have spoken with the IAFF representatives, and they felt like it was a great process, and my hat is off to your Elections and Registration Board. They did a great job. The parties prior to that election agreed to the composition of the bargaining unit. The election did take place end of December the 19th, 20th, and 21st. And then on December 21st, with 91% participation, the International Association of Firefighters was overwhelmingly selected as the bargaining representative. I will tell you there was, as I recall, one vote for an individual, and I believe that was someone voted for your interim fire chief to be the bargaining representative. He did not prevail, but I thought that was interesting that he got a vote. So what do we have to do now that we've got the IAFF as the bargaining representative? Currently, we are getting prepared for, and have actually already started, some informal pre-negotiating meetings that will take place and conclude hopefully the end of this month. And we're going to see what we can put to bed prior to face-to-face negotiations. Towards the end of January, I expect the IAFF will send us a formal notice to request a collective bargain. Then what we'll do is we'll meet hopefully during the month of February to work out a collective bargaining agreement. The agreement at some point has to be ratified by the IAFF membership and, of course, by the Commission. The issues that we have before us are, what if we don't reach agreement within 30 days after the start of negotiations? The statute doesn't tell us what to do if that's the situation. In most situations, if you're negotiating in good faith, you would continue to negotiate. It is very, very difficult to get a first agreement in 30 days. In fact, there have been a number of studies over the course of the last 2 or 3 years that show that a first contract in both public sector and private sector can be in excess or take in excess of 400 days. It's a concern to me that the mediation decision is only advisory because, if we are negotiating in good faith, the question becomes, do we continue negotiating after that? How do we reach that collective bargaining agreement that I know that we all want? And then there's no procedure established by that legislature or by our legislature for ongoing negotiations. So that's really where we are. It's a short, simple, and sweet process. I will tell you the IFF has been very accommodating. They have been nothing but pleasant to work with. I hope they found the other side of the table or the other team the same, as far as I call it the management team. But honestly, everyone gets along so well in Athens-Clarke County that it's almost like we really all are working together, which certainly we're trying to do. And so that concludes the presentation as far as the PowerPoint. I'd love to take some questions if anyone has questions about the process, my experience with IFF or public sector unions. I'll try to answer anything you would ask.
Thanks, Bill. I think Commissioner Fisher had a question.
Yes, Bill, so we're getting ready to get into the budget season for us. So if we start these negotiations, but we have not started our budget process, how does all that works and how would that affect us moving forward? Because we, not knowing right now what our budget's gonna look like and, and what we're gonna present forward, to
Sure.
all our employees. So how would that would look like?
That's a very good question. And Commissioner, what I understand is that the county will be building its budget process starting February, March, through that time frame. And that's why we've selected the month of February to do the face-to-face negotiations. I don't know yet exactly what will be most important to IFF. I'll tell you that when we went through this process at the city of South Fulton, we did do a lot in pre-negotiations where we had over the course of actually 3 months, because their negotiations took 3 months as opposed to the one. But what we did during that 3-month period is basically negotiate 2 or 3 or 4 different subjects that were important to IAFF. A lot of times what you'll find is important, of course, is wages. Benefits might be important. I think overtime may be important this go round, and so we likely will negotiate that. But I can tell you that IFF is committed to working within our process and working within our budget year, and have again been very accommodating to exactly what you're talking about. So I don't anticipate we're going to have any issue not either making your budget or meeting your budgetary timelines. It did at City of South Fulton get a little bit longer than that 1 month, 30-day period. Nevertheless, they were able to build their budget and I think adequately, handle the request by IFF at that location.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I love us having the reputation of getting along really well. May it be so.
Well, I work in a lot of negotiations, and I can tell you that not everyone gets along as well as I've seen folks get along that I'm working with in Athens-Clarke County.
Something in the water here. I like it. I just wanted to ask. I think it's slide 5. The CBA can't exceed 1 year.
Right.
So, am I understanding correctly that basically we enter into this process whenever they request it, and then the process kind of concludes with the CBA, and then after that year or less, however long it's established for, expires, they would have to request again to initiate it again, otherwise there just wouldn't be a process that year, is that right?
That is exactly what would have to happen. Many collective bargaining agreements have a clause at the very end of them which state that the union has to request within 60 days of expiration negotiations. And if they go past that period, that collective bargaining agreement will stay in place for the following, generally 1 year. I've only ever had a union miss a deadline one time, and it was during the pandemic. And for that local government, they held them to the 1 year status quo, basically. They, as I'm sure you were aware and probably still aware, finances were a little bit up in the air at the start of the pandemic. People didn't know how much money they'd have to spend on this type thing. And so, it worked to the advantage of the local government at that time. But it's very rare. Honestly, for a union to miss that period would result, I'm sure, in a change in union leadership. Let's put it that way.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, so the state legislation doesn't really give us any guidance on the mediation process. So are we effectively being asked to negotiate a mediation process or negotiate a negotiation process? So there is a process moving
Well,
forward?
it actually gives us a little bit more clarity on the process as opposed to what happens if we don't reach agreement after the mediation. It gives us, and I don't have the statute opened up in front of me, but I'm happy to send it to you, but it does tell us, for instance, what factors the mediators should consider. It does tell us that the union chooses one mediator, I always say company, so the local government chooses a mediator, and then those two mediators choose that third mediator. And then you present your arguments or your proposals to the mediators, and the mediators might say whether or not they're reasonable. And then at the end of that 30-day period, they're charged with giving you their opinion. And unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but at the end of that period, they give an advisory opinion, like this is what we think is fair. Now, I can tell you there is currently only one IAFF collective bargaining agreement in the state of Georgia, and that's at the city of South Fulton. Atlanta's been working on it for a couple years. Savannah used to have an agreement with IAFF, but what happened there was they did not pass an ordinance, basically. Then they had a change in the individuals that were on the council or commission, and those individuals didn't want to go forward with passing an ordinance. So while there used to be an agreement in Savannah, there's not an agreement anymore. So you effectively, if we reach an agreement, which I'm confident we will have the second IAFF local government agreement in the state. And so my point in telling you all that is that we don't have a lot of guidance from the courts. We don't have a lot of guidance from the legislature, and there have really been no mediations at all in Georgia that have addressed the issues that we're talking about. So we'd be plowing some new ground if we ever went to mediation with IAFF on things we didn't agree to.
Anything? Andrew Williams?
Attorney Mosley, we had this conversation, and since this is all new for all of us, I wanted to prompt your insight on this. But one of the things that stuck with me, many things we've talked about, is that this collective bargaining agreement is effectively a contract between two parties. So it involves a contract negotiation. So there may be different roles for management versus the elected officials versus the IAF and IFF. Can you please clarify that?
Absolutely. And that's actually on my list of things. So I appreciate you asking that question. A collective bargaining agreement is a tough thing to ask your staff and your employees to negotiate. It, by its very nature, puts them at odds. And so I always look at least in the public sector, the government, the commissioners or councils or boards roles as being one almost in the context of a procurement. You know how you have that cone of silence in a procurement where the procurement's out? We've got your managers that are charged with negotiating on behalf of the county. You've got the IAFF that's charged with negotiating on the behalf of the employees. And then at some point, after the IAFF ratifies the contract, it'll come before the commission. And to me, the role of the commission at that point is to try and do what your role, I'm sure, is at everything you do. What's best for everybody? What's best for our employees? What's best for our budget? What's best for the relationship between management and the union? And so it's, a lot of times these type of things in the public sector get political, and it just makes it very hard for everybody when it gets to that. I'm not anticipating that that's going to be the case here in this situation. Again, it's been impressive how well everybody gets along, but we can't guarantee that'll always be the case. And while the managers or management side is supposed to be looking out for everybody, sometimes we as management lose sight of that. Employees are supposed to be looking out for employees, but they might lose sight of, well, we're all in this together as far as the county goes. To me, the council and commission and board's role is to, be the final decider of kind of what's best for everybody. And so when they're negotiating in the background, it makes it really hard on both parties. There's no law that says that can't happen, but I think it really does resemble, in my mind, and I used to work at a local government in Florida, it does resemble, in my mind, kind of that cone of silence when you have a procurement out and you've got something that's coming to be recommended. Because at some point, this contract or this collective bargaining agreement will be recommended as for you to vote on and hopefully approve it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Bill, is there anything else you want to leave us with here before we close?
No, I'm in great shape. Hope everybody there is. Glad to see you all made it through the terrible weather. I'm up in Washington, and it's Washington, D.C., and it's happening up here right now. So I think I'm stuck in my hotel room for the night.
Be safe up there. Thank you much, Bill. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone, next order of business tonight is going to be one of our TSPLOST 2023 projects. We do have one entire independent municipality in Clarke County, which is the city of Winterville. And so as part of preparation for the project, they put forward and was accepted first by the recommending group, and then by this body, and then by the voters, some geographically specific projects, and that includes a storm drainage project there in Winterville. And so Derek Doster from our SPLOST team is going to discuss what that is going to look like as it comes out of the ground.
Thank you, Mayor. As we get our computer set up real quick.
Okay, she said, what was it? Okay.
Always fun getting our technical devices ready to go. Again, good evening, Mayor Commission. We want to bring tonight a brief overview at a project concept level of our Winterville storm drain project. Today is a living proof day of why we need to do some of those types of projects, and we want to go over it fairly quickly, and that way we can move as quickly as we can into the design phase of the program. So we're bringing it to the project concept. I'll introduce it. We've got one of our design teams, Rob McPherson with Prime Engineering here, and Mike Cater in our office will kind of help finish this up as we move forward. Your typical slide, purpose and statement agenda that we typically go through. Little history. Again, this is project number 1 on the 2023 program, so it was a viable, high importance to y'all, and we want to move it forward as quickly as possible. And we've done some user group meetings through the course of this year, and just wanted to know to highlight one thing on here as a history item. Is that we took it from a neighborly perspective. The mayor mentioned, we have another government entity that we're inside their jurisdictional boundary. We went to them last week to their city council meeting, and we presented it as informational purposes only. They were very excited. They're ready to break ground. They're ready to move it as quickly as possible. Just wanted to share that with you. I won't read all this, but generally, it's a storm drain project. We're gonna focus on inlets. We need to get water off the road to make it safe, and how do we convey that in the storm drain network system downstream? So we're gonna focus on those kind of things. And any ancillary items that come along as the designs evolve and mature, we'll keep those in mind. But from a budgetary standpoint, this is truly focusing on stormwater improvements. This time I'll ask Rob to kind of come walk you through the general components of what we're going to try to do.
Thank you, Derek. My name is Rob McPherson. I'm with Prime Engineering. Thank you very much for your time this evening and all of your hard work. Basically, what we have been looking at is storm drainage improvements in this area, and it really revolves around 7 different areas. And those areas are identified up here. One is to deal with failed or undersized drainage pipes. Most of the drainage pipes in this area are 18 inches in diameter, and when you get a rain like today, they don't have a chance of trying to convey any water. The curb and gutter along this route, it's a fairly flat section of road, and the streets have been paved multiple times, and so instead of a curb and gutter that's 6 inches deep, we have a curb and gutter that maybe is even only 1 inch high, or even with the top of the curb. So that curb and gutter isn't functioning as it's designed, which is to convey and move water along the edge of the road. We have inlets that are along this road that are grate inlets. And as you can imagine, particularly in the fall, when the leaves fall on top of these grates, they basically act like a blind, and there's no water going in those inlets at all. So we want to look at modifying those, still have the inlets, but have an open curb on the side of it, so if they do blind off, water can still get into them. We have ditches that are full of sediment, just from years of buildup. And in some cases, we have a pipe that's trying to discharge into this ditch, and this ditch is half full of sediment. And so what we need to do is clear out these drainage ditches downstream to get positive flow, remove vegetation from them, and clear the sediment out. We have areas in some places where this water conveys downstream, and the actual culverts downstream in one of these subdivisions, literally the bottom of it has rotted out. It's a corrugated metal pipe, and it needs to be replaced, and we don't want to put this new storm flow through it and not fix that area downstream. We have driveway aprons that literally, as you drive down the road, you actually go straight off the edge of the road and down the driveway. So these are clear areas where the water drains down and turns and just goes down the driveway instead of on down the street and into the storm drain. So we want to repair those areas. And the last thing is once we repair these curb and gutters and we raise them up, because we don't want to necessarily change any of the street grades, we need to raise the curb and gutter along the side. And that also will affect the sidewalks behind them. Some of these sidewalks are old, they're narrow, some of them are broken. We'll replace that sidewalk. We'll get good ADA compliant ramps at them with painted crosswalks. And then I think the only other thing I had on here that need to be touched base, there are some areas where we want to actually create some bioswales along the side of the road between the road and the trail, so that we can convey this water off the road, get it into these swells so we can infiltrate the water, get good water quality, improve sustainability, and reduce downstream flooding as well. So those are the main components of this project. Let me go down to this slide. We start about 200 feet from Athens Lane. So you come into a new section of road, you go through a curb, you hit a high point right there where it says Project Start on the left side of the screen. And then the project end is actually another high point down just a couple of hundred feet west of Robert Hardiman Road, which is on the east side of the downtown Winterville area. There are 2 low points in this section of road, one right near the Wintersville Baptist Church, and then another one just to the east of Pamela Ann Court, which is also sort of behind Avery Village, I believe it is called, an assisted living facility.
what are some of the things specifically we want to do? You can see from this sketch, curb and gutter replacement all on the road from the project start all the way going to the east on Main Street. We will we will replace existing storm drain structures and storm drain pipe. We will add new storm drain systems on both sides of the road. This is really to get the water out of the street and into the conveyance system to reduce hydroplaning and make the road safer. If you've ever driven down this road on a hard rainy day like today, you better really slow down because your tires are going to hit that puddle of water and off you're going to hydroplane. So this should eliminate a lot of that. Going to the next section, we have a significant amount of water coming down the little driveway of the Winterville First Baptist Church. We want to put in some interceptor drains there so that the water can't get to the main street, and then stick it in the pipe, route it underneath the street, and then discharge it into a drainage swell that runs sort of due south to the bottom of the page on this plan sheet. We then hit another high point right there where the call out on Main Street is, in the center of the sheet, and then that water starts flowing back towards City Hall again. And then that's the area where we'd like to put in the bioswales, basically between the new trail that's been installed and Main Street. Then down in the southeast corner, that's one of the main drain swell points that's literally filled in. There's no capacity in this drainage swell because it's filled in with sediment and tree growth. And then we have that one pipe replacement in Winter Hill Drive that we need to address. Going further to the east, we sort of get down into the middle part of Winterville, and we're going to add some additional drainage structures in, some additional, we'll put in some very small, like little humps in the drainage ditch so that we get 6 to 8 inches of water, maybe 12 inches of water trapped in the swell so that we force infiltration and improve the water quality. This will pick up sediment and other debris that comes off of the road and then catch it there as opposed to allowing it to continue to go downstream. And then again, continuation of a perpendicular drainage collection system along Main Street to allow it to flow through the pipes as opposed to in the pipes themselves. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike and let him sort of cover some of the financial, and then we'll entertain any questions.
All right, good evening. My name's Mike. I'm with the TSPLOST office, and I'm in charge of presenting our budget and timeline for this project going forward. As you can see on the screen, we have just over $2.7 million for the entire project as approved to design and construct this project. You can see the breakdowns. It is a fairly typical, straightforward engineering project where we anticipate, costs for design, possibly some land or easement acquisition, testing, miscellaneous contingency. All told, it leaves us approximately $1.98 million for construction, and that is carrying our contingency as well. As of right now, our engineer's estimate is for just over $2.26 million. We recognize that that number will get refined as we develop the plans towards the preliminary design phase, and we do anticipate if the construction estimate does not come down that there will need to be some phasing associated with this project, which we will bring back to you when we bring the preliminary designs, what our recommendation for that phasing would be. And as far as our schedule goes, we are scheduled to take it in front of the TSPLOST Oversight Committee later this month in hopes of approval and bringing this project back in front of you for your consideration in February. With your blessing, we anticipate having design done in the summer, May, June, with final design working through permitting and land acquisition in early fall, and hope to have it begin the bidding process by the end of the year. We'll start in spring of 2025, and we're anticipating approximately 1 year worth of construction completing in spring of 2026. And that is the information that we have, so please let me know if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Melissa?
Yeah, so the 2.7 million is what's available in SPLOST. That's what was
Correct.
on the SPLOST list and voted on. Yet it says there's just under 2 million available. Where's the disparity with that extra
Not
grant?
encumbered or anticipated for other expenses. The
Okay.
difference is in design, testing, project management, land acquisition. That totals your difference between the 2.7 and the 1.98.
So we gotta come up with like another $300,000.
The
possibly.
difference is 281 as it stands right now. And again, we will have, to build it out completely all at once, yes, it would require more money than what we're showing in the budget right now.
Okay,
But we'll have a much better idea as we get closer to finalized plans.
okay,
Jesse?
thank you.
Two, I think, brief questions. One's following up on Commissioner Link. Thanks for this. Are there not other TSPLOST 20? I'm guessing that there's at least one other TSPLOST 2023 project that could be applied to make up this gap if we had a gap to make up. Is that staff's understanding as well?
I mean, there's the 2023 program. I think we're so early in some of the 2023 program that, to take money to adjust or to enhance the budget here at the cost of another type of project, I would have to defer to y'all and defer to the manager's office. But I think right now would be maybe a little premature because we're not quite sure exactly how much money we may or may not need. And so we'd kind of like to refine that some and then have a better recommendation when we get there.
Commissioner, do you mean that generally there's a stormwater project within
Yeah.
the program?
Yeah.
I think that was
Yeah, that was my implication there, yeah. So just if necessary to have in mind. The other question I have, this is for both Winterville, but also, Bogart overlaps with my district, so I'm just kind of curious in the process here. Like, what formal, if any, approval does the Winterville City Council need to give to this, or is this entirely in our hands and they're just basically giving updates as an FYI?
The way we understand it, it's more of an FYI. Of course, we'll give them, the deference they deserve as elected officials. The way we understand the service delivery plan, the cost and maintenance and the upgrade of the infrastructure and the right-of-way is the responsibility of ACC for the city of Winterville. If that's incorrect, then we'll work with the manager's office on to get that corrected. But to our understanding, I specifically asked to give them an FYI update to reserve y'all's opportunities for approval and not trying to create a conflict between, like, if somebody said one thing and somebody said the other. And again, they were very receptive of that. They were very excited about the project, and I think they're willing to, just keep it on a informational purposes only.
Thanks.
it. Allison?
I appreciate the details in the priority list, that first 7 part, because I think that when we note those curbs that shrink with the paving coming up and being level, I think, Mayor pointed that out about a situation recently on Millage with that recent paving. It's more than perceived safety for the pedestrians. It's the routing of the water where we want it to go versus up and out of that curb and gutter flow. So looks like you've got this section down.
We hope so.
All right, thanks, everyone. Go forth and do well.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate it. All right, everybody. Next item that we'll have is really sort of in line with a lot of the sort of beautification and presentation work that we've been prioritizing the last couple of years. Of course, have that great corridor median plantings that you've been seeing come out of the ground in so many places, from Nowhere Road to Epps Bridge. Collaborative work that we've seen between corrections and central services with 2 new crews out there doing beautification work, but also some exciting litter surveillance work that we've got underway, and that Suki Jansen and her team from Solid Waste is going to talk to us about.
Thank you. I don't have great gifts. Sometimes I come bearing gifts, but I do have a piece of paper with lots of great information about what KCCB has done in 2023. So I'll pass that to you all. Although it says my name on there, I am not presenting to you all this evening. It's going to be Tony Huff. I'm really excited to introduce you to Tony. Tony is our part-time program leader for the camera surveillance program with Keep Athens-Clarke County Beautiful. You also have here tonight the executive director of Keep Athens-Clarke County Beautiful, Stacy Farrell, and our program coordinator, Stacy Smith. So we're here for questions if you have it, but Tony's going to take the lead and tell you how we have handled the camera surveillance program that Commissioner Thornton really championed. So hopefully she'll see this. We're excited for her to see the fruits of her labor with this program. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey.
Good evening.
Hey, good to be here. Good to see some of you guys, some for more than one time, some of you for the first time. So my name is Tony Huff, and Solid Waste saw fit to hire me about a year and a month ago to kind of get involved with this program for the camera surveillance program to see what we could do with some of the illegal dumping that's going on in Athens-Clarke County. And I think it came out of an initiative last summer from the Mayor and Commission to provide a little money that provided for my position and some camera equipment around the county to see what we could do to find out what the problem really is and then how to address it and hopefully abate some of the situations that do exist. So again, I came on in November of 2022, and before that, we kind of worked. They'd already been working on the program here, and we'd gotten a good number of cameras in. Actually, the county Solid Waste had purchased 45 cameras, which are basically kind of advanced trail cameras that wildlife would use. Some of them are like standalone cameras to try to capture photos of illegal dumping and littering. Some of them were considered license plate readers, which will really try to focus in and get details of a car's tag so that we could then use that to track down offenders and stuff. And then some of them were connected by a cell so that we could have actual viewing time on our apps or be notified when things might occur. So 45 cameras were purchased, those 3 different kinds at that time. And we began to set about, my first couple of months here is what do we address? Where do we go? I think the initiative came from some concerned citizens along right-of-way roads, but stuff being dumped on private property from the right-of-way, more or less. And so some of the right-of-way sites that we've addressed early on here were on Pittard Road, Smoky Road, and lately kind of off on Dawson Road, but really on Athens-Clarke County property there with the landfill. But to help try to determine whose trash trucks are letting stuff fall out as they go over to the landfill. And then also we saw an immediate need to look at our own recycling drop-off sites around the county, which can become overburdened very quickly, especially around holidays, Christmas and New Year's, and can become a harborage for a lot of illegal dumping, and especially stuff that shouldn't be there anyway, when we're talking large pieces of furniture, mattresses, tires, things like that. And we've tried to work with some partner test sites, one in particular, Little Angels Daycare. Some of you may have heard a little about that, and trying to help another agency, the homeless shelter here in Athens, determine really the cause of why they can't control one of their dump sites that they have on their property there. Had some other sites there, as you see. The mall is now inactive. That was a very heavily infested site with illegal dumping. We posted cameras around Westchester Drive after a recent cleanup back in the summer, I believe, there. Try to monitor if there were any hot spots that we really needed to watch for and address. And then had some over at Fleet Maintenance. There's a couple of roll-offs over there. Finally had to remove those because just the activity of the traffic made it almost impossible to catch good photos of what would be going on there. So really since we got rolling from December, January, February, and in March began to really bring the program to a point where we felt identified as a program, for illegal dumping and how to proceed with citations, with enforcement, with things like that. And so since the end of last March through the end of December, we have sent 97 violations to the code office, hopefully for a citation. Some of those are still in process. Some of those have went through. The average fine seems to be coming from the municipal court is $300 per offense. Some people get community service sometimes it's a combination. It just really depends. And a lot of those are still in the process too. Nothing happens immediately within the month. It's about a 3, 4, 5 month process on some of these by the time the code office is able to identify the people, serve them, and actually get them in court. So we saw real quickly that a lot of the violations that were happening may not warrant citations, but we felt we needed a way to notify the violators that this is not proper what you're doing. And so we worked with ACCPD where we provide them tag numbers of what we feel are less minor violations, and we send a joint letter from the police department out to these violators, acknowledging that we know what they've done and asking them not to do that, and it could result in further citations or fines in the future. It also allows us to track habitual violators who just like to go from site to site or places dumping things sometimes. We have come up with 13 violators we've identified. These go along the lines of more of the private property, where we kind of leave that up to the individual property owner to make an assessment of what they need to proceed for an abatement of the problem with their violators. These have been escalated up to state court, some to major companies here in Athens actually firing some of their employees who were in their company vehicles during the day when these occurred. So one of the good things that's come out of this is we're developing and getting a lot of departmental cooperation now and learning how to route from our office and what we find with law enforcement, if it's a more egregious violation or it could approach a felony level. We work with some of those. We work mostly with code enforcement right now, which has worked out really well. We can send them basically an email with everything they need to go and make their case. And it saves them a lot of legwork other than notification and then showing up in court for the day of the proceedings. Good working relationship with the attorney's office. We've now been in state, magistrate, and of course municipal court. And we're also looking at some policy and procedures for how to work together so that we aren't overlapping and we know who needs to handle what part of the process as we try to correct some of the violations out there. A lot of the things that came up were we realized that some of our current local codes need to be revised. So we've got to review those, go through some revisions on those. We've actually got signs posted throughout the county that reference statutes and ordinances that don't exist. They're so old. So there's a lot of updating in the process as we try to work through this. It is still a program that we're trying to push forward and actually get maybe a policy and procedure handbook from Solid Waste for how we'll handle these situations, which will make it easier for law enforcement knowing what they can do with us, what we can take off code enforcement, and vice versa. So, as I said, capturing incidents is not just the only part of it. It's not like we take a picture and send it to somebody. There's a lot of legwork, a lot of follow-up on our behalf and on the behalf of the other agencies that get involved. What we're seeing, those 100 or so citations are only a fraction of what are going on out there. We're limited with our manpower and what we can actually view, the photos that we capture on the limited cameras that are out there. Code enforcement's really stepped up, and we appreciate their efforts from last March where they had 2 of their officers helping us. Until now, I think in December, there were 8 officers who had actually been involved in some of our cases. So they're sharing the workload over there. Of course, more citations take more court time. We've spoken with our attorney and one of the judges, and they said, maybe we'll have to come up with an afternoon court just for basically litter court, trash court. It could come to that point should more be provided there because they're certainly there to do. There's a lot that we can forward on. I think someone had wanted to put the Little Angels update in here, and Suki, I don't know if you want to address that, you want me to
Yes,
speak
sir.
on
I
that?
received emails today, and so I don't want to get into it tremendously, but we did have a new occurrence with Little Angels. Little Angels, we did catch a person that was illegally dumping there on the cameras. We encouraged the owners of those dumpsters to take this information and go forward with it, because she wanted to stop what was occurring. You can see that in the picture. Unfortunately, her case was completely thrown out. She was very disappointed. I think a couple of commissioners were on that email, Commissioner Link, Commissioner Davenport. And then today, she had a warrant out because the person that did the littering occurrence is suing her for perjury, and then there was another charge in there. So I think you all were sent that information. Our only piece of that puzzle was giving information from our cameras. The attorney's office has a great letter that we have to have any private property owner to sign to say we can put the cameras there. And then we will turn over any camera footage, any information we have on what has occurred on their private property. But it's up to them to take that step forward and then turn it over to the law enforcement, the proper law enforcement officers. So she's greatly disappointed with what happened at state court, and then she's very upset about what happened today. So I don't know that, since it's going to be an active case, how much we want to talk about it, but that's, we didn't want to talk about her specifically here or the violator, but we have this case that did not turn out the way any of us thought it would. So maybe offline, I don't know if that's a conversation, but we did want to address that. Tony worked hard, though, to get the owner of those dumpsters all the information they needed to at least help curb some of what you're seeing in that picture, and it did not occur like we were hoping that it would occur. So.
Thanks for the update on that.
So some of our opportunities and challenges that we have, every day I'm working, our staff at Solid Waste, to keep Athens-Clarke beautiful. We're working in better ways to try to speed up these processes that we're involved in, try to be better at what we're doing. I know personally where it was taking me 5 or 6 or 7 hours to identify one case, get my information together for a citation, has greatly improved. Now there can be several cases per day that I can view the cameras and know where to place them, how to look at them, and things like that. So we're all learning every day to be more efficient in what we're doing. A lot of the discussion that we have with, especially with code enforcement and also with the sheriff's office, is to go ahead and let's try to find a felony case that we can take forward that will gather a lot of attention, we think, for the community and get it out there. So we're kind of on watch for that, and maybe where we could place some cameras or how to get involved with the felony case. We're seeing a difference in the amount of dumping that's going on, especially at the recycling sites, since we're able to crack down on some of the recurring violators. Some have gotten more than one citation now. Some who got warnings have gotten citations now. Some are just being told, this is happening, and they know it. So a lot of that has deterred them somewhat, and it's not as bad as it was a year ago. I personally have seen a dramatic decrease, and not just closing the mall site, but in all the sites. We have seen an influx recently of Barrow County tags, I think because the city of Winder decided not to do recycling anymore. So a lot of those have been pictured and documented. Also, Oconee and Jackson County tags show up frequently in some of our offenses. One of the biggest things now, I think, that we have to face and get a handle on how to approach this is the scavenging that goes on at some of the recycling sites and other places. And that's hard to do when the scavenger is not in a vehicle. We got a number of those. We actually had groups that were coming through at 2, 3, and 4 o'clock in the mornings at some of the larger sites, especially the mall, spending hours out there going through all the dumpsters and leaving a mess. Well, they're gone. Anybody with a tag pretty much is gone now. But they're walking up, they're on bicycles, and they make a horrible mess. What was inside a dumpster or the recycling bin is now outside, and it just gets added to and added to. So One of the good things we just recently got, I picked it up from my office last week, is an additional camera to work with, and this is part of the flock camera system that ACCPD uses. So we should be able to tie in with theirs to help track violators. A lot of times it's hard to capture the tag on a vehicle, even if you have 6 cameras on the site where the dumping occurred. And this will help us in those instances where we don't, to then look at other nearby cameras for the same vehicle and tag capture so that we can be more, get a better percentage of not losing some of the more recurring dumpers, especially some of the commercial handymen, things like that, who come around and they like to dump in particular places a lot of the time. So I think that's going to help us a lot. We've not had time to play with it yet. We do have it in our possession though, and ACCPD seems willing to work with us on it to help us get implemented with them so we can see all the cameras now. So it'll basically double our effort for our eyes in the field out there. And also I've talked with John at Code Office where we can use these and help them in maybe cases they're having that are not littering or otherwise. We can kind of all just kind of work together on a lot of things instead of working over each other and be a little bit more efficient. So this camera that we did get is a portable one. The rest of the ones in the county are stationary on poles. So we can move it wherever we see the need to have it posted. And hopefully I'll be able to report to you in a few months of whatever the efficiency of that one camera did. So what do we suggest? More funding for prevention activities, more community cleanups, maybe some help to review footage and additional cameras. It's running. It's a program really in the infancy that can go a lot of different ways. It can run steady as it is with, 150 citations a year, or it could be increased to 300 very easily, or it could be back down, or we could look for different violations. So right now, the way the process is, it's working. I'm happy about it. I think Keep Athens-Clarke County and Solid Waste is happy about it. But we can go in different directions and raise it up or down as we need to. We do need to look at the ordinance changes and update some of those. And one possibility would just be to impose and go ahead and set fines for violators. That would save a lot of time in court should somebody want to just pay a simple fine. Let the county receive that money and move on and save a lot of legwork there. A bulky waste collection. An initiative from Solid Waste would be great because a lot of these events involve bulky waste, the mattresses, the tires, the dishwasher, things like that there's nowhere to dump unless they pay somebody to take it off or they take it to the landfill and pay for it. Those are the things that are being dumped that cause a lot of problems and then create other clutter being dumped around them. So we need to advertise more around throughout the county about what's happening. There's enough cases now with enough fines. If it's publicized, I think people will begin to realize, hey, maybe I don't want to set these 4 tires off at this site or down this back road here or whatever. And we've got to get our procedures in place. That's been a working process. Everybody's worked great, us with the courts, with code, with law enforcement. No complaints there, but it's just a process to kind of get everybody together and identify what each department needs to do. Questions?
Appreciate the presentation. This seems to be a more strategic and effective approach than the cursing that I do. So, let's see. Let's start with Patrick.
All right. Thank you all for all your work. And I do have to, I would be remiss without saying, it is a pleasure to see you, Stacy. God bless you and all the things you've been through. But for code enforcement, so this is a question for Manager Williams. I'm sorry. So it says division. Excuse me. So they started out with two people in code enforcement helping out with illegal dumping, and now the 8. Are those new positions, or they are just reallocated from other positions?
I don't think we've had any code enforcement folks in a while. As you know, our code enforcement folks all work districts, and I suspect that they've just pulled in more of the folks to observe the protocol and working.
Yes, they're having to work out of their districts now.
Okay.
I think they thought initially that a couple would be able to handle it, but like I said, we can provide them twice as many cases as they're getting. So,
wow.
I called it districts. I think they call them zones when they work in.
And Okay, so Jackson, or Coney counties, they have landfills, right?
They have a transfer station in Jackson County, that's a public transfer station, and Oconee County has a landfill, yeah, oh, sorry, thank you. Yes, yes, Jackson County has a transfer station, and Oconee County has a closed landfill that acts as a transfer station, but they have solid waste facilities.
And you had mentioned, it's an influx. Is it mostly out-of-towners who are illegally dumping, or is it a mix?
It's, I would say, just from the info I've looked at it, and guessing off my head, 85% are Athens-Clarke County residents.
Okay. That's,
And it's always fun to get the out-of-state people because they're hard. That's another thing, a learning lesson for us. If someone's rented a U-Haul, out-of-state tags are really hard to serve and track down without requesting information through the companies, and those kind of fall through the cracks right now. That's another area we can really work on.
And last question was a statement. Like, I like the fact of advertising, because I found out that, like, if you call ACC Solid Waste and you have like a TV, call them, you set up an appointment, they can add the cost of them picking up that TV or whatever on your water bill. So I want to say that publicly so people stop throwing trash on the side of the road. You know, somebody in the ACC Gov can come pick it up.
Melissa?
Yeah, so I know there's signage at most of these common dumping sites that say no dumping. Have y'all considered putting up signage that actually like lists where you could take your stuff, like a suggestion, hey, it's illegal to dump here, this site is being monitored, but here's a legal place to take your trash.
Signage is a frequent topic of discussion in our office. There are a lot of thoughts. The more signs, the more cluttered and littered it looks. The less signs, the better it looks. Some of us are of the opinion the more signs, the more descriptive they are, it gets the message across. So that's a discussion every day, I think, with Keep
Yeah.
Clarke Beautiful and Solid Waste, what to post there. My immediate thing is to get the ordinances right that are out
Yeah.
around the county first, and then do that, or publicize some of the violators.
So we're likely to see some ordinance updates to pass in the foreseeable future.
We've had discussions with the other departments about moving that forward, yes.
Okay.
It should be in the, specifically, we're working with Austin in the attorney's office.
Okay.
And we hope to, next cycle, have some beginnings of some
Okay,
ordinances
good.
that we'd like changed to help this program.
Yeah, but so are there signs that indicate this site is being monitored, no dumping, so people know that they're on candid camera?
There are some sites that indicate that, yes.
I'd also suggest that public shaming is a powerful tool. If some of this video and some of these images could be posted publicly to Solid Waste's Facebook page and
Got a connection
social
to Bad and
media,
Busted,
it might be
Melissa?
effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad and busted for dumpers.
And we could do that with the cases that we're finished with in court, who
Yeah.
they have been settled, so yes.
Thanks.
Dexter?
Yes, thank you very much for this. If somebody dumps on a private property, is it up to the owner though to pay for it, to have the trash dumping removed? Or whose responsibility if somebody is illegally dumping on somebody's private property? Who's responsible for getting it cleared off?
It's my understanding that if it goes from previous history this past year on private property, it's the property owner's responsibility to clean it up.
Okay. Okay.
Now, having said that, if we have cameras nearby, we can capture who has done the dumping from our cameras and sites. We can forward that to the code office for citations without them having to be involved in the prosecution of it, but they would have to clean it up.
Okay, thank you.
Allison?
Yes, thank you very much for this summary. I've begun to go to the litter abatement steering committee process again, and I think that collaboration is helping with what we're seeing here, slow and steady progress. I do hope that the recommendations that come out of maybe the next meeting or the next cycle will come directly to us, so we'll know what budget implications there might be, because if it doesn't make it through the manager and the mayor's priorities, we we need to know what those are for when it comes to our turn to discuss the budget. Some of the problems that you talked about that are still existing, and I thought that it might be a budget thing, is putting cages around these dumpsters. You're talking about the dumpsters being evaded and dumped out. So do we have any of our dump sites that are caged to where they can't be used 24/7?
Not that I'm aware of, outside of the Charm recycling site downtown.
Yeah, but if those kind of solutions are seen as a bona fide solution for some of this, I encourage us to learn more about that so that we can include a budget for that. And then the logistics of it being opened and closed, understanding how that would be for staff. I did have a question about how many were out of county, but you ended up talking about that. If you have any email information, you can follow up and send us on the sightings you've had and the breakdown, whether it's in county or out of county. I'd be interested in learning that.
Absolutely, and that's another part of this working process, is when it leaves us and goes to the code office, it gets a different designation or a code number, then it goes to court and gets a different citation number, and we get the results back from the attorney's office with a completely different number and a name that we didn't have to start with. So
Yeah.
we're putting those 4 links together, hopefully in a spreadsheet type form initially, to know case 1 ended this way, or what happened in the county and what was involved and the fine amount. And that report, within a few weeks, we should be able to update that and give that to you.
Right. Well, I think it would be interesting for us to even know at your visual end, without knowing the results, just what you're seeing from your camera footage. And it's great that you're getting one of the smart, I call it a smart camera,
Right.
smarter than the trail cameras. And if that's another budget consideration that you guys are talking about as you deal with this day in and day out, that would be good for us to know.
And I believe firmly after, once I get this one integrated with what's already here, in a couple of months of using it, it'll let us know if future purchases or leases of these are worth it or not. You know,
Yeah.
we don't, that's when we only started with one. We wanted to try to make sure it was worth
Right.
the money.
Right, and I think that's smart to get the portable type so that you can
Right.
effectively use that as needed. And I just think that it's good for us all to remember that we've got parts of our county that it's mandatory roll cart and service from our solid waste department, and then there's a large amount of our county that doesn't have to pay for that, and the dumping is a result of people not paying to put it where it's supposed to be, and it's naive for us to think that people are doing the right thing with their trash when they don't have trash service for the Clarke County tagged people. But anyway, thank you very much. I look forward to upcoming meeting.
And just quick note, kind of the big policy question that you're getting at, Commissioner Wright, really is, you know, this question of what are we going to do around, you know, either county provided or zone services, and that will be on a upcoming committee assignment calendar. So be looking for that. Jesse?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for this and all the really great stuff Solid Waste does. It's good to meet you. My 2 things, well, one that came up, the bad and busted idea. But if people do want to move forward with that, I highly encourage keeping personally identifying information out of those posts. I mean, those things live on the internet forever, and so I think there's a way to have the effect of people knowing that, you know, you might be seen doing this sort of thing without needing to leave a record on the internet forever that can, you know, maybe have effects beyond what we would hope. So, but my question that I kind of arrived here with, and I don't know if this is something that y'all can calculate, because I imagine there's probably at least 2 problems, which is it's probably really hard to get the kind of data I'm asking for be reliable, and 2, as the program grows, you probably get more people using it, and so an uptick in reports may not actually indicate an uptick in the problem. But I am curious if solid waste staff has a sense of whether enforcement on these particular sites is leading to the dumping just spreading out in other places rather than ceasing to happen, or if it's actually helping. Do we have a sense of that yet, or? Are we seeing an uptick, for example, in like reports generally?
Stacey, do we have, she has a, can you explain what you have created, Stacey, to help track all illegal dumping?
So as part of our litter abatement steering committee, we do have a system with the GIO office to track where there is dumping. And so citizens can report if they have dumping, like, there's a mattress, there's a bag, larger items, and also employees all feed into that. But I don't know that like you would see the change because it's like more using, like as people start to notice more that they can report that. So we're able to kind of learn more about different areas that need help, but I don't think we'd see the shift. But we definitely are, that's something that we are trying to track to see what's being dumped, where it's being dumped, and I think that would feed into answering a lot of questions about like, oh, tires are a problem, this many mattresses, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, maybe I'm just throwing out here kind of a conundrum I'm thinking about that I'm not sure there's a clear answer to, because you perpetually have this problem where when you get better at public engaging with the tool, the uptick in reporting may actually be a representation of things going down rather than going up. But one of the cautions I have is if we get really good at enforcing certain sites and we're noticing a pattern that a lot of the dumping is from chronic offenders, well, do those folks just keep kind of finding new sites or spreading it around, with like random roadside dumping? So again, just kind of throwing that out there as a thing to keep mulling over, which I'm sure y'all are. But this is very encouraging. Thank you.
All right, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Last item of the evening is, at least in my estimation, one of the more important things we'll be talking about really this year and over the next couple of years as we consider what really the future of Athens-Clarke County is going to look and feel like, and what opportunities there are going to be in this jurisdiction for people to have places to live. It's really been over 20 years since we've done a large and significant and deep dive into our land use planning to the extent that we're doing now. And so I'm glad that all of you are on this body to be part of this. And this year, next year are going to be critical when it comes to kind of rolling out what really our children and even their children are going to experience as being part of Athens-Clarke County. And so I know we have several folks here for planning. I know Bruce Lonnie is listed on the sheet, and I'll let him introduce everybody else who's here.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity this evening. Mark Beechuk and I are going to present. This is a milestone moment for us in this process, working on our future land use policies, as the mayor mentioned. We're kind of overdue for this deep of a look that we're taking right now, but in many ways we're at a halfway point. And what we want to present tonight is how we got to this halfway point, talk about the growth concept map and the content that's in it and why it is built the way that it is built. Who did we hear from to get to this result? And then entertain questions about it afterward. But Mark's going to speak first, and I'll wrap it up.
All right. Well, looks like the Bearcats tip off in 15 minutes, so I'll try and be quick here. Thank you, commissioners and mayor, for having us this evening. We're coming back to you this evening with a few pieces that we talked to you all about in the fall, and then a little bit of an update of what we were doing throughout the fall, and then Bruce will finish up with some of the work, the analysis, and the scenarios we're looking at going forward. So thanks for having us back again, and this is the one more step along the process until we get to the future land use map here towards the end of this summer coming up. We've been using this idea of a land use budget approach, so this concept that we've got inputs and outputs, and we've got limited amounts of resources and things that we have to keep in mind through this process. So we've tried to use that idea as we go through this to not just sort of guess at what we're doing, but to hear what our constituents have to say and to use some data behind these metrics and get really in touch with our other staff and our other departments here. So we then engaged in 26 opportunities throughout the fall, as well as an online opportunity to hear from the public. Had some great opportunities there, and I'll get into that data and how that happened here in just a little bit. And then we're going to wrap up with kind of where we're going. So some of the optimal potential scenarios. We know that growth is coming. We know that we need to make accommodations for this growth, and we need to put that in places that matter and mean something. So that's, around our amenities, around our existing infrastructure, around the things we need on a daily basis. So a few big ideas came out of this process, some from internal and some that we heard while we were out in the public. So we want you to keep this in mind over this presentation, over the course of the future land use map, as we go forward with potential policy changes and then get into our comprehensive plan in the not too distant future. So growth pressure is going to remain constant. What we've seen here from the market is positive. It's great for Athens-Clarke County, where we're going, what you all have done as a body, what this community has brought to the state of Georgia. And so we're happy about that. But it comes with some change, and we're trying to plan for that change and make it worthwhile. So we know 30,000 plus people off of our data are probably coming. That could increase heavily depending upon what our friends over at the University of Georgia do. There's talk about them increasing the student body as well, so big important things to keep in mind. We know that housing variety and availability must increase. Very big points. We heard it over and over and over again. Big trends in the urban planning community, and we'd like to bring those here to Athens-Clarke County. And then a lot from our fellow staff members about making sure we're replacing the expensive and aging infrastructure that we already have. We're going to be building from the core out. We need to make sure that this infrastructure is in good shape, and we need to make sure that we are doing the things to keep this municipality in good standing and keep the books in line. So we're going from where we were hearing to heard a lot about our wants and needs. So very important stuff that we liked. We'd love to accommodate as much as all of that as we possibly can. But we know that when some of those come in conflict, we have to make some trade-offs. So determining where development density can realistically be increased is a big question we have, and we want you to consider. We'd like you also to see what possible trade-offs for more efficient land use patterns can be brought about through this process. And then lastly, discussing how affordability and quality design can both be achieved. We know that change is a factor of this positive growth that we've seen, and that our financial considerations should guide our thought process throughout this effort. So real quickly, we worked through that land use budget. I'm going to go through that here next, a little bit of community engagement, and wrapping up with some scenarios. So first slide, you might remember from our last presentation about our land use budget. We've got three big buckets here that we've been working with, from the very rigid to the firm to the a little bit more malleable. So our natural environment, our topography, rivers, riparian buffers, open space. Not a lot we're going to do to change any of these things. There's not a lot we would want to do to change those things. We've got the built environment, which we've put in place. We've got a wonderful gravity-based sewer system, one lift station, something to be very proud of. You're going to see that outline here on our maps over and over again. We found it to be a very important aspect of what we did here in this analysis: our water system, storm system, roadways, greenways, and trails. And then we get into some of the policies and some of the planning that we can have a little bit more influence on, but this takes a lot of political will and a lot of buy-in, and that should get us to that comprehensive plan update by 2028 that we're all pushing towards. So just real quickly to go over that land use budget by zoning type, this is land mass here, so 37% in our AR zone, very low density. Our green belt, a lot of natural amenities there. When you throw in our single-family detached, you're at 2/3 of our land use already right there with very low to low density. Adding in our government, institutional, and parkland, you're almost up to 80% there of our land mass. Then you throw in another 10% where our jobs and our production happens. And I just want you to look at the voids that are on this map, because it might foreshadow where we're going with this process a little bit. Once you add in our multifamily, so this is our multifamily only, our RM zones, just 5% of our land mass, taking up a good chunk of where our multifamily resides and where a lot of the projects you hear about come into play. And then the other big part, our commercial zones. So these last two zones, 11% of our land mass is dedicated to where almost all the decisions from a zoning perspective come before this board. So just want to make that clear how much we're talking about when we talk about where rezones and upzones and changes in our patterns occur throughout Athens-Clarke County.
Mark, I think while we have that map up, if you could
Yes,
table
sir.
back to that. Allison,
Yeah,
a
the
question?
visual communicator would like to ask something here, especially because I've seen this out in the community as well. I think that if the color boxes could be bigger and you could write out, I know you guys live and breathe AR, the EI, the I, the EO, if you could write all those out, leave the abbreviated part for those that know that level, but maybe have another of the same color underneath it that's literally spells out what those are. And I really did like the way you were doing the accumulative percentage as we built up to the 100% that was outside the box too. So if you kept that running as well.
Sure thing.
It's empowering that progress that you're with your add up.
We'll get that changed before we get
And,
this posted.
and I love the way that the colors are distinctly different so that they're not multiple shades of the same color. So it's distinct in the value as well. If somebody were to print it out and not have color
Wonderful.
or something like that, I think that it would stand up. So
Couple of quick
I
questions
appreciate
while we're on the
that.
map.
Yeah.
Allison, or excuse me, Melissa and Mike.
Yeah, it would also be really helpful if you could point out some landmarks and some major roadways on there so people know where they are on this map. Like maybe, downtown, Atlanta Highway, Millage Avenue,
Okay.
East Campus Road, and, just let people know kind of where they are on this map. Highway 29.
Yeah, we look at this map all day
Lexington
long.
Highway.
and
Yeah.
I think we think it's standard, but I know
burned
it's
on the
not.
back of your eyelids, I'm sure.
Well, I think on large maps, that'll be possible,
Yeah.
but if you want to capture the whole county, it's going to be difficult. to
Well,
put
I mean,
road names
even
in
like
there.
a half dozen landmarks, so people could just
Okay.
somehow orient themselves, major
airport.
landmarks throughout the
Maybe if
county.
you had state highways, that may be.
State
helpful.
highways, downtown's here, the mall maybe, the Kroger, something like that, east side, landfill, something like that.
Okay,
Just
we get it.
a half dozen or so, like, major county landmarks that everybody knows where they are.
Okay.
Mike?
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So I have a question, Mark and Bruce. So if I'm reading this correctly, so the all RM is at 5.2%. That's just the zoning, right? That doesn't mean that all of the RM has been built out, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's just
So-
the zone landmass square area by zone.
Sure. So I think what might be helpful too, as you go through this process and as people are, just so everybody has the information that they're seeing, especially when we're talking about growth, that it might be helpful when we look at all the RM that's been zoned, what's still left to be built out? Because I know on the last slide, when you gave the last presentation, you had a slide up that talked about the different multifamily that have been built, and I think at that time, between 2018 and 2022, roughly 20,000 bedrooms have been built. So how many more bedrooms can be built out if everything were built out in the RM zone? Do you see? Because I think don't you think that might be helpful to know if we're talking about?
What do we have left?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. What's left to be built out within RM? And maybe we can think about if there's some incentives we can offer, if that needs to be built out. But I think it'd just be helpful to know what's left in the RM to be built out. How many bedrooms can somebody go and build out by right?
From a land use budget standpoint, we have those numbers. That's
Okay.
absolutely part of what our
And maybe,
analysis is.
and it may be a little bit more work, but also in the RS, because Kelly, we've been on, and Allison, I mean, we've been on this commission for a while and have rezoned properties that haven't even been built yet, that are still out there.
Jesse, we're looking at this.
I get what you're saying, Commissioner Hamby, and it makes a lot of sense to me, but I just kind of want to clarify. Do you mean, like, zoned parcels that are zoned that way that have been built upon at all, or that have been built to the max capacity of that zoning?
No, I'm just asking the question about what Bruce said. What's left? Is what's left to be, what's left to
Effectively,
be
what's a
built?
green field at this point?
Right.
What's still a green field? Okay, which I guess two things that come up, and I don't know how to split these hairs exactly if we were going to get that map, but two things that come up for me is there are places where there's something built, but it might not be in very good condition that a lot of us would think of as like ripe for redevelopment.
Well,
And
that's
so
different.
that might
That's a
not-
different story.
That's
Yeah.
that's different than
That's different.
greenfield.
I'm thinking of places like over in your district where we just voted on the car dealership to go in front. Behind there could be several hundred homes being built or in an apartment complex.
So you're just talking about
So,
greenfield.
so what's
Okay.
what's left?
Okay. Because the other thing to keep in mind is when we talk about RM zoning, there's a lot of neighborhoods, we see them come before us a lot, that look like single-family neighborhoods but are zoned RM. And those are historically usually more often African-American neighborhoods. So I just want to be careful that we're not thinking of RM zoning as inherently a place to try to densify over RS zoning, given that history.
I think what we'll probably find out as we go through kind of this series of conversations, not just tonight, but in the months ahead, is that, we both have some untapped potential in things that have not been developed at all, and we've got some sort of underdeveloped parcels or parcels that really have become functionally obsolete. We're obviously in the midst of the North Downtown redevelopment, and that I think is a good example of that latter dynamic.
I think that'll also become a little bit more apparent as we get into the future land use map effort and we get into that parcel by parcel, because a lot of that is focused on redevelopment opportunities. But Commissioner Hamby's point, I think showing where there's nothing so far would also be a very good point to make. Okay, so when we went out to the public, just want to talk a little bit about how we learned. So we had 5 different opportunities to meet with us, along with a online public input. Really appreciate at these 26 events that we had, all the commissioners that were able to make it out and contribute and be a part of this process. So our biggest style was the sit-down meetings. We did 2 components to this. We had a creative engagement part to begin that, to get people thinking fresh, talking about their values, and actually they engaged in listening quite a bit more by going through this kind of unique exercise. We then went into a data presentation, a lot of what you saw from us in the fall, followed up with a question and answer. We then got out in the community and did a few walks. This was one of everyone's favorite, I think, in the department, to be able to see and engage that built form, to experience some of those corridors in ways they hadn't seen, and also to see some of the different things that are out there that people might not have known were in their own neighborhoods. We had 2 bus tours, an east side and a west side. Lots of thanks to the transit department for allowing us to use one of their buses for each of those. Got to show a little bit more of a comprehensive view of the areas. Then we had some tabling events at a few events that were going on in the fall. These were a little bit more of the general comments. We got to kind of meet people where they were. It's a little bit more of the highlights in the issues as opposed to in depth. And then Stephen in our office was able to get out there into 2 of the schools, I believe it was Clark Central and Hillsman Middle School, to engage the youth and hopefully bring along that next generation that will be leading Athens here in the very near future. So from that input, we had over 2,000 comments that we categorized, had lots of other wonderful conversations throughout with the community. Over 50% of those comments came about the right-of-way and the open space and landscaping. Really interesting, important things about connecting people, about getting out into nature, things that we all kind of inherently know we want to do, but sometimes the planning world struggles to put some of those pieces together. Sometimes adults lack the time to get out and enjoy that, so it was wonderful to hear that. A lot about safety and the right-of-way. And then a quarter of our comments came from residential and built form. So we know that housing is a big issue in the community. We know it's going to continue to be an issue. We know it's something that we need to address. But we're really impressed with the community to really dig into the issues of right-of-way and form, which are things that we over at 120 Doherty Street talk about all the time, but don't often get to talk about with the public. So that was great to hear. And I'll dig in just a little bit on kind of what we heard. So in terms of function, heard a lot about the mixed use. In terms of the form, those design standards, that human scale, limiting parking, reducing setbacks, blending the neighborhood, looking into potential for structured parking, maintaining that downtown core, and then, of course, nodal development. From a residential perspective, we heard a lot again about scale, that proper scale. People feel it. You don't always know it, and you might not know why the zoning code has certain limits on it, but a lot of that's to do with that human scale that we kind of know and inherently see when we're out there. Residential variety being a big one. ADUs brought up quite a bit. Senior housing, more housing, density and affordability over and over and over again. From a commercial perspective, we heard about addressing vacancy, lots of love for our local restaurants in our small and our local shops. In terms of open space, it wasn't just trees, it was trees, trees, trees. Trees everywhere, as many as we can get would be wonderful. We do a great job in this community compared to our peer communities for our overall canopy and want to have that maintained and preserved. Shared and activated green space, hopefully leading to parks with that connection, connecting people to water, parks to people via trails. We actually heard quite a bit about rural preservation, fishing, and agricultural opportunities. It was wonderful to hear a lot, especially on the east side of town where we have a lot of those, but we're very unique having a downtown core, an in-town neighborhood, and then all the way out to our rural landscapes that are wonderful. On an institutional setting, it was a lot about pulling these things together as neighborhood centerpieces. And then of our rights of way, lots about safety, quite a bit about traffic, not always bad. Some about how traffic being moderated it gives people the ability to experience and bring value to communities. Prince Avenue being a wonderful corridor that we celebrate. The topography of Athens-Clarke County is a bit of a challenge. Walkability and connections came up over and over again. And then also transit and trains, possibly expanding beyond our borders here in the near future. I will turn that over to Bruce.
Before we go any further, when you did your survey, did y'all do a demographics for the breakdown of age, race, or any of those things? When y'all did the survey, was there?
That information we could pull, we were face-to-face with these people. So we didn't really ask them their age as part of that effort. We were just getting input from them whenever we could and wherever we could.
Okay, well, I guess I was under the impression when y'all was at an event, y'all gave them something to fill out, and they gave it back to y'all, but you all were just asking questions.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Well, if we do another survey, I would like to see
Very good.
that demographic based on age,
Yeah.
race, and things of that nature. And my second question is, you ain't got to it yet, but I'll wait till you get to it. You ain't got to it yet.
Okay.
Melissa, just stopping at the public input part.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of relates to what Dexter brought up about demographics. I'm looking at the rights-of-way, and parking is not on there. And one thing that I hear primarily from folks in our older African-American neighborhoods is the challenges of on-street parking, particularly as those neighborhoods densify with students. These are small lot neighborhoods with really narrow streets, and at least once a week, I get a call or an email from someone who is just furious about parking conditions, and I'll send TPW out there and they'll yellow curb, and I'll get a call from someone else who's furious. So that's a huge issue. That is like the number one issue I struggle with in my in-town neighborhoods.
So noted.
Kelly, I have a question about the public input. And John, I'm just curious, when you mentioned the comments, the number of comments you received, I think you said 2,000 comments. Do you know how many people that actually represents? I mean, it's because somebody could have commented on more than one topic, I would imagine.
It was a couple hundred
I guess
that
so.
were involved.
So a couple hundred went through the whole public input process?
Between all 5 input opportunity types that we had about a couple hundred interfaces that generated those 2,000 comments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So when you have that opportunity to talk to folks and listen to them and take those things down, it's a wonderful checkpoint that I wish we did every week, to be honest with you. And so it was really rich for us to be out there and talking to folks. The next step then is to take what we heard that they care about, that these people are concerned about or value, and turn those into guiding principles. And so that's what we did. This is kind of where the wants of the people that we talk to meet the needs of what we project for our community over the next 20 years. And so these 5 guiding principles are an attempt to encapsulate that, and we'll show you how we translated that into a growth concept map. But the first thing that we picked up on was that people were concerned about their corridors. They wanted to see growth, but they wanted that growth to go in targeted areas and be of a certain type. And so we're blessed in the fact that we've got tons of corridors to work with. And those corridors, to Commissioner Hamby's point, have potential for additional growth. Some of them are developed in a way that could be maximized with some creativity and with looking at other opportunities and really kind of setting the regulatory framework for it to happen. So redeveloping corridors and focusing on nodes where we want the growth to occur and target those strategically. To minimize their sewer expansion, we've had really good conversations with our public utilities staff during this process. And growing capacity within our existing network is our top priority. There are things that we can do inside our existing sanitary sewer service area that we need to do over the life of this, the 20-year life of this plan. But there are some areas that we want to talk about for possible sanitary sewer expansion, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. Reducing travel distances. A lot of folks were worried about pedestrian safety. A lot of folks that we spoke to wanted to be able to do more in and near their neighborhoods where they live today, not to have to drive to the other side of town. Honestly, that's one of those things that as a mid-sized city, we should be trying to focus on. We're not a small college town anymore. We are a mid-sized city. And when you get to that level of growth and maturity with your development forms, you don't want to have to drive everywhere to get to what you want. You want to be able to walk to it or maybe have a shorter drive or use transit. So localizing trips is a key goal of what we're doing with the growth concept map. Making sure we're getting people near those destinations too. So it's not just bringing commercial to where people live, but making opportunities for folks to live closer to those destination uses, whether that's a park or a commercial center or a job center. And then having some amount of connections anticipated to distribute that traffic better, more efficiently within these nodes in particular. Planning for incremental growth in all neighborhoods that are served by sewer. And when we say all neighborhoods, we kind of mean it. Every area in town that has adequate infrastructure is worth revisiting for opportunities to grow in some form or fashion and to do it, again, over 20 years. So this is not anything that's meant to be alarmist, but we do recognize that if we're going to house 30 to 38,000 people in 20 years' time, we're going to have to revisit some places and come up with some new approaches. And to make that happen appropriately, we're going to have design standards and some expectations for how that's to be done. And then finally, we want to support environmentally sustainable growth. We've done that great for about 20 years now with our land use planning, but fiscally sustainable growth is something that we want to prioritize with this effort. And I'll talk at the end about where we stand with looking at consultants to come in and help us with that. But what we want to be able to do with this next growth concept map and future land use map is set us up for success fiscally as a community and make sure we're maximizing the use of our infrastructure. So how to interpret those 5 guiding principles? Mentioned that we want to look at corridors. Let's look at places right now that maybe aren't used very efficiently and revisit those, not just on the corridor, but maybe a block off of the corridor, and let those areas carry more development capacity. And along the way, dress them out. Make them areas that the public wants to be a part of and be within. And then we've also identified 3 nodal types. Urban center being the most intense of those, that's your downtown area, but it's also the mall now. Town centers, which is kind of a step down from that urban center. It's meant to not carry the same level of density, but a mix of uses that are nearby, adequately handle pedestrian traffic, but you may have transit and some other things serving those as well. And then neighborhood centers would be even smaller scale and would be distributed throughout town. And when we get to the map, you'll recognize some of the ones that already exist and probably pick up on some ones that we've targeted. Yeah.
I have a quick question. I don't want you to answer it tonight. Just follow up in an email. I would like to know, because you guys live and breathe this, I would like you to give us those 4 categories, and I'd like you to list what your examples are that we have.
Sure.
In an email, just to follow up to everybody, because
Fair
I'd
enough.
like to see what you're calling which.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
And admittedly, everything we're doing tonight is shorthand. We're trying to present a bunch of things to you and then get your feedback about it, so I appreciate that.
Okay.
So as we think about the growth concept map, we took those 3 node types, urban centers, town centers, neighborhood centers, and looked at our development patterns that the market's already told us are viable, that are working today. And then let's focus on the ones that maybe were viable in the past that need to be revisited, and maybe are areas that are new opportunities that we could maximize over the next 20 years in a way that we've never touched on before. We've also identified the connecting corridors, that development interconnectivity between the nodes and where we want to target some of that information. But I want to draw your attention to the red line, kind of looks like ants marching on the map. That is the extent of our sanitary sewer service area. So every one of these nodes that we've put on the map is within that sanitary sewer service area. And that's on purpose. That's us being strategic. That's us trying to focus on where we've got investment but also where people live and work and play right now. That's where we want to carry the bulk of our growth over the next 20 years. Where those 30,000 plus people come to live, work, shop, we want it to be in these nodes first, but not exclusively. We recognize that growth is going to occur everywhere that it should occur, where we have adequate infrastructure. Breaking this down, we'll work from the west side to the south side. I want to draw attention to a couple things. When we were talking to folks in all parts of the county, we were hearing that walkability. We were hearing that desire to not have to drive to the east side if you're on the west side and vice versa. That going to downtown is fun when you want to do it, you shouldn't have to do it. And with the west side, you have this wonderful mix of open space, shopping opportunities in schools and institutions, how to reinforce those development patterns a little bit better, because this side of town grew in that mid-20th century time frame where it was very auto-dependent. On the north side, we've got some opportunities here that we'll get into in just a second, where the sanitary sewer area kind of comes in close to town. And we've got a lot of new sanitary sewer area that is out the 2972 corridor, Trail Creek, where we have a lot of potential to do more. And then we have our trail networks, which are a wonderful source for alternative transportation that we need to think about as something other than just a place to ride your bike. Maybe it's a place that can support growth in the future as well, and we think it should be. And then in the southern and eastern side of the county, this is where infrastructure doesn't reach quite as far, and that's okay. One of the things that we're doing with this 20-year plan is making sure that we can do another 20-year plan. So you'll notice that green area, a lot of folks refer to as the green belt, it's still on the map, and that's on purpose. We're not done growing after this 20-year plan. We're going to have to keep looking at this. And so we need room to grow, and we need to protect some of those environmental resources that are so important to us. So all of that summed up to this view, but we want to draw attention to 6 specific growth opportunities that we think this body and the community as a whole need to be thinking about during this exercise. The one that's labeled number 1, Downtown River District is what we're calling it, but it's essentially the other side of where the Classic Center expansion is occurring, where we have an entertainment district that is growing. Left to market forces, the other side of the river is going to feel a lot of pressure from that. And we want to be ahead of that curve. We want to be thinking about what our land use policies should be for that part of town. We don't want to see things happen haphazardly. The second point is focused where the old city reservoir used to be.
Amphitheater.
Okay. So depending on which landmark you want to lean on, yes, the amphitheater site. We want to think about what that site can be if it's not going to be that. And this exercise, again, we're at a midway point, but we're going to spend some time thinking that through. We've got a lot of opportunity there, particularly if you consider bullet point number 3. We have 3 sewer basins that we've been in contact with our public utilities folks. They are in the very early stages of their 5-year capital improvement program. And the outcome of this future land use planning is going to help inform their capital programming. But Area 3 is the lower Sandy Creek Basin. And we know we have many, many homes of folks, particularly lower income folks, that are on septic systems that are aging out. And at some point in the very near future, we're going to have to make steps to address what the next 10, 20 years are going to be like for that area. What form sewer service takes is up for further discussion, but we know we need to talk about it. Area 4 is that basin for Trail Creek that I was mentioning that has a lot of capacity. It's the newest and the best and the shiniest pipes we've got in the ground. And there's a lot that can be done out there, more than just what's occurred with market forces dictating it. We want to be strategic about that growth. We have a lot of good bones out there that are relatively new, and we need to make good use of them. Area 5 is a basin of the Upper Shoal Creek that is served presently in small spots, little pockets. For it to work with engineered sewer, it would have to work with the lift station facility that we currently have at Weatherly Woods. And The engineering department, public utilities folks, their consultants have said that's possible, but it hasn't been programmed yet, and that's part of the analysis that they're going to be working on. Area 6 is just simply UGA. Once upon a time in our future land use mapping, we had a university district. And for a few legitimate reasons, over the 25 years, it came off the map. We want to look at that again, and maybe we don't call it a university district, but we think it's wise to think about the land that is adjacent to the university and the different kind of pressures that are there, the different type of market forces that are there, and let's get ahead of that curve as well. Let's do right by those areas and let them carry the capacity that they should. Let it be something that's value added for the university to grow and flourish, but let's make sure it's a good interface with the community as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Bruce, that was my next question about the institution. And we looked at Athens-Tech. Same thing. I mean, 10 years from now, who knows how big, that institution may get. So I think it wouldn't hurt us maybe to add in Athens-Tech and just see what their growth plan gonna look like.
Fair enough.
So.
And that's very much a part of why bullet point 4 up there with the Trail Creek Basin, Athens-Tech is a huge asset for what that area could and should be over the next 20 years. So I'm with you.
Melissa?
Yeah, I'm really interested in this idea of a university district because effectively the downtown area has been our university district, and most of our growth is really focused, and it's put a lot of pressure on these in-town neighborhoods. But you look at the other side of campus where it's extremely low density and you haven't seen a lot of growth. I'm thinking like South Millage and Lumpkin and, East Campus, that area. And it is adjacent to campus, and quite frankly, a lot more campus activity takes place on that end of campus. North Campus really doesn't have classes even in many buildings anymore. With all the growth in East Campus and the actual campus activity out there, I feel like we should really focus on some more student-oriented growth on that side of town. And it does have access to plenty of amenities, 5 Points and Lumpkin Street. And there's a lot of, fairly large lot, tiny mid-century cottage properties that are ripe for redevelopment. And, a couple low-rise apartment buildings that And the university, quite frankly, really should take on some responsibility in redeveloping some of their property. I look at family housing, and you have really old, fairly dilapidated buildings that could go high-rise and accommodate some of these thousands and thousands of students that they're bringing into our community.
I just got to say, since you're picking on my district here, that the family housing has been renovated recently, and they do consider it nice. They've been doing a lot of work on that, which I think is the university's commitment to the scale that's right there. And I think that the property owner and the residents around, we have our pinch points and we have our pressures. We've got our duplexes, we've got our multifamily elements speckled through the single-family area. We have many multifamily, which would be the Greek ones as well. So I think that we can spread that university, you're densifying in more places than just around the university.
Be interesting to see what that, Shops of South Athens, kind of Whitehall, Millage, kind of interchange nodes kind of end up looking like in a decade. I mean, certainly those are proximate to university and underdeveloped, given what could happen there. So, all right.
Okay, so wrapping up, next steps. So here's our timeline. This is our timeline to get to a completed future land use map and have that in front of you by the summer. Where we stand right now is where that star is. With tonight's presentation, we're wrapping up our presentation of the growth concept map. We are anticipating the formation of a future land use steering committee. And then at the end of this month, we will have consultant selection for the development and infrastructure revenue analysis. That's a key kind of point for us. We want to make sure that we are doing that with a fresh look, and that we're being very thorough, and that we're folding that into the development of the future land use plan appropriately. So starting in February, once we have that consultant on board, We'll be working with them on their analysis, getting them all the things they need to do the best possible job. We're going to have public input, to Commissioner Fisher's point. That public input opportunity is going to be a creative one. We're working with Tool Design, who has worked on some other projects here with Public Works and with Athens in Motion. And we're going to have an online opportunity that we can also do in person, if folks choose to do it that way, that is going to be looking at trade-offs, looking at the facts and issues that we've identified over the past year, and let the citizens put it on the map. Let the citizens develop where they see folks living and working and what it should look like. We're kind of excited about that. So it's a visualization tool. It's also going to be something that is meant to be very hands-on and inspire conversation with staff, but you can do it at home too. So once that's available, we anticipate that to be out and up and running in February. And we're going to work on future land use scenarios all along the way. May and June, we're going to wrap up those findings. There will be a presentation to this body by that group that has yet to be identified, but they'll be showing what they've learned, and we want them to spend quality time with all of you. We'll have more public input on those scenarios that we've put together based off of that online interactive tool. And then we're going to have that first draft of a future land use map by June. That was our schedule, and we're still on schedule to have that prepared by that point. And then July and August will be Planning Commission and Mayor and Commission consideration of that map. So that would wrap up, that would get us through the summer of 2024, just looking at the bottom image here. Once we get to that point where we have a future land use map that we've endorsed and that you guys have approved, then we'll be working on our strategic plan out of the planning department to do missing middle housing text amendments, using that information about where we want density to go. What do we want that to look like? This becomes that first wave of implementation to get some things in the code to allow those things to happen. And then growth management policies that'll tag along with those trade-offs. And then starting in 2026, we're going to get very serious about the 2028 update to the comp plan. So the performance of this process right here is going to inform that comprehensive plan that'll be a very substantial redo of our comp plan. And we anticipate also very substantial zoning code changes that will come out of that community-oriented process. So with our future public engagement that's coming up in the next month, some of the questions that we're going to put to them, we wanted to put to you. So where can development density realistically be increased? Keyword realistically. Where can we do it? Because we're going to need to do it. We've got folks coming over the next 20 years. We need to be prepared and put those folks in a position to succeed, and frankly, to let the market succeed. 2, what are the trade-offs for having more efficient land use patterns? So parking is one of those trade-offs. It's a tough one. If you try to maximize your land for development and bring people into places, you're also pinching the availability to have off-street parking. So what are we going to do? So that conversation will involve transit. That conversation will involve potentially shared parking. That conversation is going to have to look at Athens in Motion and where we already have infrastructure with bike lanes and other alternative means of transportation, because it's got to make sense. Third question, how can affordability and quality design both be achieved? It's not easy to get affordability, and quality design is a challenge too, but we want both. And Athens has said that every single time we've gone out to the community, and it makes sense that they would say it. So how can we make it happen? And we want our code, we want this process to set us up for success with a code that can achieve a balance between affordability and quality design. So that is what we had to present to you all tonight.
So we've got some sort of discussion questions. I don't know if you want to orient your thoughts around those or have some other observations or maybe questions about next steps. Allison?
Yeah, can you back it up to your timeline?
Sure.
So on your consultant selection, has the RFP already been developed for that?
We had our pre-bid meeting on Monday of this week.
Okay.
Yesterday.
And you had a successful applicant pool?
Pre-bid, that's an early take.
Okay.
We may have some other folks show up along the way. We had 2 very earnest people come and talk to us about what the project's all about.
Okay. Well, I guess my consideration that I hope is included in the consultant's project and looking into in the infrastructure feasibilities that you're talking about, is that it seems to me I hear you when you're talking about expanding the sewer. Very expensive for us to do, as well as the property owner to tie into. I would like there to be continued discussion on how we address septic tank service financial assistance. It seems to me it would be cheaper for us to be working with septic tank property owners, helping them clean out, making financial assistance for them to clean out and properly maintain their current septic tanks. Because many of the properties, and maybe we could get a list of how many there are in these different categories, but it's my understanding there's many properties, if their septic tank fails, the property is too small to put in a new septic
correct.
tank and the specifics for the new ones. And there are new septic tanks. There's places being built, in other communities. It's not that septic tanks can't be used, because there's new and better ones being developed. But addressing those older ones before they fall, or before they could be not usable and condemning the property, I think that would be a wise investment for us before trying to extend a sewer line. And then I've thought this before, but I think it comes in here, when we start doing surveys, I think it is, if we're gonna do the demographic question, do it at the end so people can get involved in the topic. But I think it's important, and I saw this on the North Avenue survey, if you're gonna ask questions and the word bicycle is in a question, that the survey should include 2 questions. Do you have a bicycle? And then some categories on how often you ride it. Because I think it's really important for people to validate the number of people who are answering these questions that might think, sure, of course I think I want to have a safe cycling for those people who have a bike, or for me who has a bike. I think it's good for us to know that bike ownership number as well as frequency of use.
And on that point, I don't want to overpromise what that public input engagement process is going to look like. It's going to be very targeted, but what we're trying to do with this effort is coordinate with our other departments of the government that are measuring that kind of information. So in talking with Public Works, we had a really good conversation with them in the past month about how this information can feed into Athens in Motion and be a part of their engagement and their measuring of those types of questions with multimodal issues. They were excited about this because it paints the other side of the picture. A lot of their focus is what happens in the right-of-way and how to support mobility there. What we're talking about is how to handle the land use that meets that right-of-way and also support mobility. So I think that when we get to that level, we may be working with them to get to that kind of a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to start saying it so everybody hears it.
Just-
Thanks.
Commissioner Wright, real quick, that we need to take a real close look at the issues related to going on a private property and doing work on these septic tanks, which are not owned by the unified government, to make sure that we didn't have any issues from a gratuity standpoint. We can take a look at that.
Right, and it could just be that it could be something really supporting the Board of Health that's allowing them to do what they do in education and outreach. And I don't know if it's possible to have zero financial, zero loan to help somebody be able to maintain it.
Be sure to look at it.
But anyway, I think that we shouldn't forget that there's a gap there that needs to be filled, not necessarily by us, but the inspectors, which is the Board of Health.
And yes, of course, Commissioner Wright is referencing, it's the state that not only permits septic systems, but is really kind of the monitoring entity as well. I'll share that, given my engagement with ACCG and GMA, I know there's been a lot of conversation on the statewide level of the state allowing localities to kind of step into that space. That could change the dynamic that I think Judd was referencing. I mean, I would love it if we could have something that could effectively be an arm of public utilities, that's the septic maintenance arm, where there may be a utility function to provide those cleaning services to do the maintenance. I mean, I'll also note, it probably is absolutely the case that there were some lots where septic was permitted where it never should have been. Where, essentially they did the perk test when it was super dry. And so the soil's like, yes, we can drink up lots of water. But the reality is those perk tests were done in atypical times, leading up to, say, the drought that we had in 2007, for example. So.
Well, thank you for this information. I forgot to say that part when I started with my inquiry.
Jesse?
Yeah, thanks for this. A few things, try to be quick. I just want to confirm, so that development infrastructure revenue analysis, that's what we called in the budget the land use economic analysis, is that right?
That's correct.
That's just the new term we're using for the same thing?
A little more specific, but the same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, I guess to your questions that you've asked us to discuss here. So where can development density realistically be increased? My thinking on that is, has to be within the sewer service area, ideally. And generally, just where infrastructure and some amount of density already is. So I think of kind of that principle of, what's it called, form-based code or whatever, where it would function different than the way our code does currently. But like everything can kind of level up one level, right? And I think we have a lot of if you look at some of those maps earlier on, some of these places that are already very dense and where there's already infrastructure are still zoned single family and surrounded by other multifamily and stuff. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, that's some of the stuff that's ripest for some kind of densifying, because that's the most missed opportunity, I think, in terms of putting people where people and infrastructure already is. As far as the trade-offs for more efficient land use patterns, you probably have less private yards and things maybe, but more shared infrastructure, more shared green space. So where that can be built out, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then as far as how can affordability and quality design both be achieved, I mean, I think same as my answer to number one, but thinking about how to incentivize potentially private development to do some of that infill or that missing middle, and to take advantage of our inclusionary zoning ordinance or something like it when they're doing that. But the last thing I wanted to raise up, I don't know how it fits with your questions exactly, but when we're thinking about infrastructure, I think the only place stormwater is mentioned on here is the very last slide. And when we're thinking about greenfield, whether it's the big, outside the loop part of the county or these yards that people have and things, I mean, we're really running into a lot of stormwater issues already on public rights of way, and certainly we're all very aware of private residents with those issues. And, apropos of today's storm, these kinds of rain events are only going to become more frequent and more intense in the years ahead. And so I think if we're trying to be forward-thinking about our land use, again, that's, I think, another reason to try to build where things already are and to try to build thoughtfully in a way to convey that water. I don't think that's something that's really going to come up in public surveys at all, because I don't think the average person who comes to one of these is thinking about stormwater when they come to talk about how they want their community to look. They're thinking about the places they want to go and the type of housing they want to live in and maybe the way they want to travel. They're not thinking about where the rainwater is going to go. They're probably not thinking about the pipes that are underneath all those things. But I think one of the things we're learning is that those pipes are both very expensive and prone to failure, especially when there's these huge flooding events. And so whatever we can do in terms of our code and in terms of where and how we're incentivizing development to keep that at the forefront of our minds, I think is going to be really important if we don't want to see some havoc wrought in the years ahead with these weather events. Thanks.
To piggyback off of that, when we were doing public input, we were amazed at how many residents came up and talked about infrastructure and their interest in it, and it was stormwater related in some instances, but certainly streets, the right-of-way was talked about a lot. And we have a very educated populace to work with, and they, I'm really encouraged. We were very happy to have the events that we had and hear what we heard.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that, and I really appreciate you correcting my false assumption about how many people would have thought about already. All the more reason then.
They're out there, yeah.
Just kind kind of highlighting a couple of the discussion points. I'll share. I think basically within the built envelope of the community, that there's going to have to be some lift in density essentially everywhere. With sort of a heightened focus kind of on those nodes and on those corridors. I think that sort of red, orange, yellow heat map probably highlighted a lot of those. Certainly there are some others. Kroger currently under redevelopment, that International Drive, Research Drive area, I think that could accommodate some more growth. But again, given those very real population increase numbers, it's going to have to be a little bit of everything. I have a little bit of appetite for some sewer extension. I think there's a sliding scale. I think it's not all or nothing. When we look at the green belt, have what I would call the sort of authentic deep green belt, and then we have something of the green belt light, which is where, while zoning, we may have AR, we've got a lot of 1 and 2 acre parcels. And I think, those are areas that we might want to consider some transitional zone. Just in terms of affordability and trade-off, anytime you can get 10 families to share 100 feet of sewer, you're creating an opportunity for affordability rather than having one family share that 100 feet of sewer. I think about the great cities of the world. Often those are places that are pretty darn dense for block after block, but they're also places that are economically vibrant, where you've got a lot of people working, you've got a lot of small businesses that are successful because, thousands of people can walk within a few minutes to that bakery or that bodega, or restaurant or suit shop. So, I would like to think that the 20-year from now version of Athens is one where a lot more people have access because we've done a lift in density in many of these places. So, appreciate the hard work on this. I'm looking forward to the next chapter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, everybody, have a beautiful evening.